Welcome to the webinar hosted by Catholic Investment Services. Thank you for joining us today for a discussion of the ethical and investment implications of artificial intelligence. My name is Tom Lanctot, and I'm privileged to serve as the Chief Executive Officer of Catholic Investment Services. My colleague, Zayla Starjan, has done a great job organizing this program and is at the Zoom controls. Catholic Investment Services was founded by some of the investment industry's most respected leaders to address the investment challenges faced by Catholic organizations. We are a nonprofit providing investment solutions for other Catholic nonprofits and their investment consultants, and now manage almost $1 billion of client assets in 5 different strategies. An important part of our nonprofit mission is offering educational programs like this one for the Catholic investing community. Enormous thanks to our distinguished panelists. You will meet them shortly. Today's format will be conversational. Our audience is muted, but there'll be time for audience questions during and after the formal part of the program. So please use the Q&A feature on your Zoom screen to submit a question. You received biographical information for our panelists, but I want to emphasize a few highlights. Jack Brennan is familiar to many of you through his many noteworthy corporate and philanthropic leadership roles, including as a founder of CIS and the founding chair of our board. Jack is our moderator today. We're especially fortunate to have 3 accomplished subject matter experts on artificial intelligence join us and contribute their valuable perspectives. Brian Barbetta is a senior managing director, partner, and global industry analyst at Wellington Management Company, where he manages public and private market investment portfolios focused on disruption and innovation within technology. CIS partners with Wellington for our public market investment strategies. John Behrens is director of the Office of Digital Strategy in the College of Arts and Letters at the University of Notre Dame. John, that's quite a title. John joined Notre Dame after 20 years in the real world, where he held executive positions with Cisco and Pearson. At Notre Dame, John now focuses on preparing current and future leaders to successfully transition through the AI revolution. Shelley Zhuang is the founder and managing partner at 11.2 Capital, which invests in founders who are using emerging technologies like AI to solve some of the world's biggest challenges. Shelley is a self-described techie with a PhD in computer science from Berkeley. Before we begin our program, please join me in a short prayer. Dear God, please grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. As always, we pray for peace and civility and offer prayers and thanks for the women and men religious, their lay colleagues, and so many volunteers who, through their work for Catholic ministries, have devoted their lives to something bigger than themselves. Amen. Jack, you've often questioned my intelligence, so I'm hoping I'm hoping for a late inning boost from AI. So again, turn it over to you.
That's confidence inspiring for our audience. Nothing could be further from the truth. We could clone Tom Lanctot. Somebody make a lot of money in investing in AI. So, well, again, let me add my welcome to everybody and thank you for joining us. Tom didn't mention, but we think this is our highest subscription of audience that we've had in these seminars over the past several years. And to me, that's metaphorical for what's going on more broadly in corporate America, nonprofit America, university America, which is that this topic of artificial intelligence, especially generative artificial intelligence, has captured the imagination and the reality in many ways at a pace that we'll probably talk about is faster than just about any technology in our working lives. And so we're pleased to have people with very varied backgrounds, very deep backgrounds, and experienced backgrounds to talk about this subject, talk about the opportunities, the threats, the challenges, the risks, the ethical issues, a whole bunch of different things that we want to cover. And we thought it might be fun to start out with just a couple of examples of generative AI output. And John is going to share a couple of things with us that will serve as a template as we get into the conversation about these important topics.
Great, thanks, Jack. All right. just get the screen set. There we go. All right. So very fast, quick overview. The world of AI has two parts, generative and other parts. We're not going to do the other parts. They're mostly around supervised learning. A lot going on there. I'm sure we'll talk about it during the session, but I want to focus on the generative AI for you. Right now, that world is exploding, as everybody knows. The main areas are in text, images, but also in video and sound. Lots of people are unaware of the progress that's been made in those areas. Lots of explosion in here in terms of different kinds of products and different kind of underlying statistical models. First, I want to talk about the image generation part of things, because often people jump right into the text generation. But the image generation is something that's very important going on, especially for small businesses. And the way this works is they collect lots and lots of images from the internet. They put it into a giant statistical model called a neural network diffusion model. And then you write a prompt that goes into that model and basically says, give me things that look like these words based on what you've seen on the internet. So one example is you give it the prompt Renaissance painting, elephant wearing a tuxedo, and it generates this. There's no picture that it looked for. It did not do a search. It actually generated the picture by kind of weaving together different kinds of layers of images that have been related to those words over time. Here's another one, electrician wearing safety glasses. This is the kind of thing that you can imagine a company or a union or a school using when they're trying to make their own curricular materials. And instead of going and getting a photographer and actors and all that, they just put that in and there you go. And you can slap it right into your instructional materials. You can see very nice, but these systems are not perfect. They're probabilistic and they don't always do what you want. They're especially bad at faces and fingers. You can see this poor guy has too many fingers for classic human. Here's a woman, same prompt, and you can see what's happened here is it's merged together the layers of wiring closet with wires with her body. This is the kind of one you generate it, you throw it out. In AI, lots of times you generate lots of ones and you throw out the bad ones and you keep the good ones. It's happening statistically, so you can't make it perfect. Here's a picture of a landscape that's generated using a prompt. The prompt is using names from famous National Geographic photographers, and that gives it the sensibility that it has. This raises issues around copyright and protection and rights, but it's an amazing picture. Now, is it art? We'll leave that to my art colleagues to decide. There's implications for design prototyping. So if I say to myself, hey, I'm kind of thinking about making a table made of shoes, what would it look like? Well, here you go, coffee table made of shoes. I don't have to make one for the prototyping. The system can generate it by itself. What if I want to do advertising? Do I have to go and get the paint and throw it in the air and get the photographers and all that? No, actually the prompt just creates it right there. Huge savings in time and money. And of course, in public communication, here's one of my favorite pictures of the Holy Father, but it's not a picture. It's computer generated in the same way all the other images were computer generated. You can imagine the implications for political stability around the world, huge ethical and social issues. And that leads us to ChatGPT. So we did a little bit, just a touch on the image side. Let's go into the text side. The way it works in the text is very similar. You get lots and lots of text off the internet. You throw it into a giant neural network encoder, decoder, transformer model, and then you put a prompt in. The prompt basically goes in and gets the information related to it. What's the Gettysburg Address? There we go. Do it again, lots and lots of data. Give me a story about Jack Brennan, the pioneer. It's seen hundreds of, maybe thousands, maybe millions of stories about pioneers. No problem, here we go. In the wilderness of the unknown, Jack Brennan, a pioneer of audacious spirit, carved paths where none existed, so on and so forth. This happens in seconds. Two things going on here. One is it's statistical, and so there's investment issues about who has access to that kind of infrastructure and that kind of person. but it's also data-based, and who has access to the data is going to impact investment issues. The way the texts work is incredibly simple. It basically predicts what the next word should be, and there's some ways you tweak it. You don't really usually get the most common word, but you just basically predict the next word in the sentence, and you do it over and over and over again. And frankly, they didn't expect this to work, but it works. But what it means is the system does not know anything. The system is a word generator. It has no awareness. It has no sensibility of truth. It's only probabilities of words. It's the champion of looking like human writing, and that will be enough for most situations. And when it doesn't have enough data, it's going to make stuff up anyway because it has those probabilities, and that's what we call a hallucination. Now, let's just go to a couple scenarios here. I'm just want to give you a couple examples because I want you to see how fast this happens. First, one of the things it's seen many examples, millions of examples, is job descriptions. So here's a job description. I want a job description for a milling machine operator in a foundry. It's seen millions of these, so it knows how to put them together. And you can see it's going to happen very quickly. Now, when I was in industry, I hated job descriptions because I did them rarely, but ChatGPT has seen millions of them, and it knows the structure. Okay, enough of that. I'm going to ask it, maybe I don't like it because it's too formal. I'm going to say, make that more enticing for applicants. And I've worked with small businesses where they weren't getting enough people involved in applying for their jobs, and they rewrote their job descriptions in ways that enticed people to actually apply for the jobs, and it changed their dynamics in their company. Why? Because ChatGPT is great at genres. Okay, here's my favorite one. Write a press release announcing that John Behrens is the new provost at Notre Dame. Now, again, it knows the genre of the press release, and it doesn't know me very well, a little bit maybe, but it's going to fill things in. It will almost universally have a quote from the president, who sometimes it knows, Father Jenkins, sometimes it doesn't, and it'll have a nice quote for me saying how excited I am and how transformational I am. Dr. Behrens embodies the spirit of innovation and excellence that Notre Dame stands for, blah, blah, blah. So this is huge savings in the white-collar world. I'm truly honored to join the University of Notre Dame, the golden opportunity to bridge the gap, et cetera. Now, it's a little formal sounding to me, so I'm going to say, rewrite that and limit it, make that more formal and limit it to one paragraph. Now, the next thing I'm going to do, I want you to pay attention because this is another area where, especially in small businesses, we see huge savings because what it's going to do is it's going to rewrite it in a different perspective. Rewrite that for a fourth grader. Hi, everyone. We have some really exciting news. The University of Notre Dame has chosen a new provost. Guess what? It's not just any provost, it's a super smart expert in artificial intelligence. Okay, so you can imagine the applications for content development and publishing. I have two more prompts I want to show you. Rewrite that in Greek. Jack, how's your Greek? And then the last thing I want to show you, and this is a very interesting situation. It's a technical side effect of the way they train these models, which is these models are actually often better at evaluating themselves than actually doing the production in the first place. So I'm gonna stop this and ask and tell it. It's a world famous Greek translation expert, and I want it to evaluate what it just did. Oh, no. Just give me the evaluation. Okay, this phrase translates to hello kids in English. This is a friendly and informal greeting that's appropriate. It's a good translation and sets the friendly tone. So I just want to give you a sense of the range of the different kinds of things that can happen. Of course, there's dangers that we'll talk about, but these systems are very easy to access. We just pulled it up, put the information in, and it's quite remarkable in many ways. So that's what I wanted to show, Jack. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Very helpful background and perspective. Other than, I'm glad there wasn't a quote from the board chair at Notre Dame in that press release, since the actual new one-year board provost might not be happy with me. So let me turn to Brian, you and Shelley. Talk a little bit about. Somebody asked you what's. There's a lot of noise. What's the most substantive things you can share with the audience at the highest level about AI and its implications? Brian, why don't I kick off with you, and then I'll go to you, Shelley.
Sure. So I think the most substantive thing, I would focus on it from two perspectives. The first is this technology, also known as machine learning, really started its renaissance in 2012 with some work at Google. So I would first want people to understand that they're already interacting with ML, machine learning and artificial intelligence really on a daily basis. So as we interact on this Zoom call, AI is actually going to improve some of the vocal recognition, improve the images. If you have a virtual background, that's going to be, again, driven off of AI. Netflix recommendations, if you watch Netflix, those are going to be AI enhanced, as are a lot of things you'll see on YouTube TV, for instance. Directions, so when you ask Google for directions in advance, it's going to forecast what the traffic looks like, again, using machine learning and AI. So I want people to understand that they're interacting with a lot of these programs already on a daily basis, and they underpin a lot of the technologies that we use regularly. So I think it's important to recognize that this latest advancement in artificial intelligence, so this generative AI that Dr. Behrens just demonstrated for us, is going to have more transformational implications. So we think some industries will grow, some will shrink, all will change. You could imagine seeing the technologies just developed. If I were a law firm, for instance, I would want to know how to use this to help create my legal briefs, or at least assist in creating my legal briefs. If I was a law firm, I'd also probably want to build a practice around defending against the number of mistakes that are likely to happen here. I expect those quotes that the technology generated are not in fact real. So one could imagine the legal implications of that. Publishing something.
I think maybe
like
John wrote the one from probably John. That's the highlight of Notre Dame's life to have him as the new provost. But other than that,
I'm sure. And it's important to think about and we'll talk more about implications, but the people impact here. So, some people will be more efficient. They'll be able to do more. It'll open up new projects, new growth. But some are likely to become more redundant. And I think it'll be important that the industry and that we as a society think through, as you continue to have technological obsolescence, how we react to that and not leave folks behind. So I'm pretty excited about what we're seeing, what's being built. And I just add the personal view of maybe not believing the hype too much and not looking at the technology that we have today and fast forwarding to a world where computers take over and computers are building computers, because we're still, at least from my perspective and from most practitioners I talk to perspective, far from that. But we're excited about the advancements that are being made today.
That's very helpful. And it's a great tee up for you, Shelley. Shelley, you're at the front end of this process in your investment work, and love to hear what you think of AI broadly, generative AI, in terms of its biggest implications at a macro level. It's similar to what Brian has. Brian sees it in multiple industries. You're talking to people with a better idea, right?
Yeah, I agree with what Brian has already shared. I think, again, to me as a tech investor, we first started looking into, so what is different, right? Like Brian said, deep learning, really renaissance or research back in early 2012, 2013, 14, which already had a lot of, if you recall, deep learning at the time, right, was the buzzword, had a lot of impact on improving image recognition, speech recognition at the time compared to more traditional machine learning models. So what is fundamentally different, right, with this new wave of so-called generative AI? And for those of you who are interested in digging into more technical details, I think it really all stemmed from the 2017 paper from Google. I think the title was "Attention is All You Need," right? So the focus at the time for the research was a translation task. How do you translate from, let's say, English to French, right? And before this Gen AI, what's called the transformer model architecture came out in 2017's paper, people were using recurrent neural networks, which again is another type of deep learning models. And the way translation was being carried out was really just kind of word for word, right? So if I have a sentence in English, then I'm trying to translate it word by word, right? And the key innovation, I would say, in the 2017 paper, the transformer model is really attention. So when you're translating a particular word in the output, not only do you look at the corresponding input word, you also maybe look at a couple words around that particular word that you're trying to translate to get more context, right? And to be able to translate much more efficiently. So I think that was sort of kind of a key breakthrough from a technical perspective. And I think from the business side, how I think the business world or what applications will actually be built, right? And obviously, there's been many iterations of improvements on the transformer paper, but I think the basic model architecture was presented in 2017 already. So as a early stage VC, we are just seeing a ton of, I mean, obviously right now it's really hyped, right? The whole Gen AI space. Both there are a ton of opportunities and startups working at the infrastructure level, solving various challenges that these transformer models are still facing, and we can talk about that in more detail. But also at the obviously people are applying at the application level as well, right? I remember back in 2015, I was doing a similar research into deep learning, how that might impact, how can deep learning be applied to areas like robotic automation or medicine, and actually found two startups to invest into, and both are doing quite well today. So I think today people are doing very much the same, right? So can we apply the new transformer model to whether it's robotics or data cleaning for data science teams or generating code automatically for developers? There's just a ton of people exploring various applications. I think we've all seen the ChatGPT interface, right? But I think there's a lot more beyond that that various companies are exploring right now. And we're, I would say, still in the early stages. And as an investor for us, I think at the high level, we're figuring out, sometimes it's a feature, right? Like if you're using transformer as underlying machine learning model, and you're doing something using that model, is this a feature that should really be added by an existing platform, right? So for example, people have been talking about translating from a natural language query into a SQL statement to execute against the database. So that is, I think, probably a feature, right, that will be built by existing large business intelligence software platforms or existing databases, right, versus the standalone company. So that's on the investment side, something that we always consider, whether or not this new transformer architecture is actually, whatever you're building on top of it is significant enough as a standalone company.
That's very helpful background. John, I want to ask you in a related way, Watson was an attempt to brand AI, I think, at one point in time by IBM. Didn't get the traction anybody thought it would. You were in industry at the time, but ChatGPT seems to be the catalyst. Maybe it's because it's consumer focused. Is that a fair thing that Watson could have been ChatGPT, but didn't quite get the legs for some reason, and ChatGPT's created this phenomenon in the more popular space because it's consumer oriented, your view?
Yeah, so I think the IBM strategy was they had a ChatGPT moment when Watson originally won the chess world champion, beat the chess world champion. And I think that their goal was to try to kind of use that as a stepping point to popularize AI and put Watson at the center of that. To the point that Shelley and Brian just made, earlier versions of AI generally required lots and lots of training in more specific areas. And so to try to put everything under one umbrella, it was a complicated thing. And my guess is the technology wasn't ready for it. These generative systems that we're seeing right now is a very different paradigm. The paradigm is you put all the data in there, you put all the pictures in, or you put all the text, and then you try to figure out what it can do versus, prior systems, which were much more focused on, can I get it to do this specific thing with this specific training data, with this specific accuracy? And now the systems are kind of turned around. As Shelley said, these were developed for translation originally, and then people started saying, well, wait a minute, it's doing all these other things that we didn't even expect, like writing computer code. And so it's a very kind of inverted system from how computer programming has worked historically. So quite a big change, Jack.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. Without even understanding all the mechanics underneath it, it's fascinating. I want to turn to challenges with this. Just the opportunities seem so real, right? But I wanted, Brian, you touched on kind of is everybody going to lose their job, or is everybody going to have a new job? All those kinds of things. We've seen that movie, right? When we went from green screens to smart workstations, everybody's going to lose their job. Well, it turned out all we did was enhance jobs, and we could be more productive. When you're talking to companies, Brian, how do they see a challenge and an opportunity both? Is this productivity enhancing? Is it headcount cutting? What's the driving motivation in companies, whether it's a company adopting it or a company making it, selling it a little bit?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the driving motivation is often to make sure one stays ahead, or at least stays competitive with their competition. So you could imagine if you're delivering a product and your competitors are able to do it either better, faster, or at a lower cost, you need to be able to stay ahead. So that's where we're seeing companies, Wellington included for that matter, try to lean into this technology and adopt this technology as soon as we can. You mentioned challenges. I think one of the biggest challenges is it's just wrong very often. So unlike a rules-based computer program, this is trying to simulate an answer, and the answer changes. A lot of questions don't have different answers. When you ask them again, they have the same answer. So there's systems that are early. I think they'll get a lot better, but they're early. So you do have these mistakes. And some companies, so we spoke with, I'll say a large technology company that has 1,000+ person engineering department. They're seeing some engineers become 2 and 3 times as productive as they were. The average engineer is becoming 30 to 50% as productive as they were. So they see huge opportunities to lower their headcount. Other companies that are looking at their customer service are seeing huge opportunities to reduce the size of their customer service organizations by sending more customers through an automated workflow that's going to be driven by generative AI. So there's a lot of efficiencies that some companies are seeing as they adopt this technology. But I think the number one underlying current through all the companies we talk to is a desire to remain competitive and to stay ahead, and to not miss something like some companies miss mobile or miss the internet. It's this need to stay ahead.
Shelley, you agree with that perspective from sort of if you're talking to founders and who their end customer is going to be and what the difference will be because of their product?
Yeah, I would say I would agree that the several areas where we have seen the first adoption, one is customer support. And that's actually been happening a couple of years ago already, but it's just been made so much better with the large language model or transformer technology. So you're kind of seeing a resurgence of using computers to help address customer support tickets, right? So that's definitely one key use case. Another is developer productivity. So we are actually, a lot of larger companies we've been talking to, they are adopting GitHub Copilot, for example, as a product to assist their engineers, right, in implementing code. And also we're seeing a lot of startups trying to address the developer community as well. I think those are probably, and then probably I would say another one is in enterprise search as well. So I think what we just saw in ChatGPT, what John demonstrated is it doesn't incorporate knowledge that's specifically that an enterprise specifically has, right? So a lot of times enterprises have a lot of internal data that they also want to be able to search on, right? And ChatGPT, for example, is trained on public internet data, and it has a cutoff time of, I think it was 2021, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. But so essentially anything that happened after 2021, ChatGPT will not be able to answer. And secondly, if you have enterprise specific data, it doesn't have access to that, right? So the way people are addressing that or using that internally for enterprise search would be, you saw the prompt, right? That you have to feed in like a question to the ChatGPT interface to get an answer back. So in addition to asking you a question, you can also feed the ChatGPT additional information or context. And that context can come from your internal enterprise data repository. So that's called, retrieval augmented generation, meaning you would retrieve some data from your internal enterprise databases, then you augment your ChatGPT prompt with that information. Hopefully the chatbot can give you better answers. But in terms of, I think challenges, actually, this is actually an active area of research and technical development. It doesn't work that well yet. I've talked to a couple of people who have used such enterprise search systems that do incorporate enterprise data, but it's sometimes it's just tricky to have ChatGPT synthesize the right results, even if you feed it the right source documents, because the data is so messy. So that's definitely one challenge, I think, just that ChatGPT and the likes are facing in terms of how do you tap into more recent data and also private data held by enterprises. Another one we're seeing is security. So as you saw, right, like the way you interact with ChatGPT is very different from a traditional machine learning model. Like if you're talking about a traditional, well, not traditional, like a previous deep learning image recognition model or sentiment analysis model, you essentially, you feed it an input, it comes out with an output, right? This is a CAD, or the sentiment of this customer review is positive or negative. Whereas, as you saw demonstrated by John, you actually have to interact with the system with a prompt, right? And because of that, you can actually, there are a lot of potential security problems. So an attacker can actually engineer the prompt in such a way to have the model spit out a malicious output, right? And then you can imagine if an enterprise is building an application that incorporates calling a LLM model, a large language model, and then using the output in its application code, you can imagine that there are ways the attacker can engineer the prompt to have the model output something malicious, and then if the application isn't checking for it, it might cause problems, right? Because the application has access to a lot of internal resources. So I think security is another area because of the new interaction interface, right? It's exposing new types of security risks. And then obviously you guys have all heard about.
I'm gonna jump to John for a second, pick up on that one. John, I'm gonna call you a neutral party because you're in academia now. So they've identified some big challenges. Your colleagues in the academy, would they agree with that? Would you agree with those, or do you see other big challenges as generative AI and AI more broadly become more and more prominent in the economy and in society?
Yeah, well, I think there's a number of things going on here. So One of the things is what Brian had said about workforce change. I've given lots of talks to small businesses, and sometimes they make decisions right there on the spot about whether they're going to hire another marketing person or not, because somebody can edit the copy, somebody can write it in a different voice, so on and so forth. I was giving one presentation and somebody, a CFO, redesigned their pizza box images right there during the meeting on the iPhone and said, I've been trying to get the creative people to do this for a year. I just did it. I sent it to them like during my talk. So at the kind of foundational level of everybody doing their job, there's going to be big change, and that's going to be a big impact. I think there's another level of change, which is some of the disciplines. Like I think about accounting and the spreadsheets. People of a certain age will remember when spreadsheets were automated. People say, "What are accountants going to do? We're not going to be doing arithmetic anymore." Well, we still have accountants, and they move to strategy, and and the machines do the arithmetic. So, like to say that that's going to happen, but I'm sure there was some loss in the middle there, and so I think we're going to see these different kinds of transitions at different kind of layers. I also worry about what Shelley was saying, the security. I mean, it happens kind of at the enterprise level, but it can also happen just at the person that experiments and puts personal data from their enterprise into the system, and then it gets built into the model. And lots of companies have prevented firewalls from just accessing it all. And then there's social issues. We saw the picture of the Holy Father, which was, artificial, very artificial.
Looked like he was working for North Face. He was an influencer for North Face.
He looked great. I wish his health was that good right now.
Exactly.
But that can be used against him and against the church and so on and so forth. And last, what's the guardrails around children interacting with these things, or people that aren't familiar with computers and might interact with them as if they were humans. And so I think there's a lot to, we just went through 10 years of social media, causing lots of problems. We don't want to go through the next 10 years of looking back and say, oh yeah, that generative AI thing, we should have thought more about it when it first came out.
Great. That's a great list. Brian, you were nodding a little bit during a couple of those comments around what happens to people in the workforce and how it plays out. You want to pick up on that?
Yeah, well, I was nodding at a few things. I agree, entirely on the workforce comment. That in the accounts, funny, I use the example of financial analysts because it's obviously close to home. But with the advent of Excel, we didn't end up with fewer financial analysts. We ended up with a world populated almost exclusively with financial analysts. So when you build these tools, you end up with people who know how to use them. It's seemingly growing substantially in the workforce, but sensitive to the fact that some will be left behind and the importance of getting that right. And the social media comment, I think, is spot on. And I think about just the various order impacts here. And one of the more obvious ones is the use of the technology for manipulation. So to build a manipulation campaign where you're able to easily have 500,000, 1 million, 500 million users that are created via one of these programs to go online and spread misinformation with malicious intent, whether that's commercial or it's state-sponsored. You could pretty quickly imagine what you're able to do if you have essentially an army of bots that appear to be intelligent. And it will be very hard to leave watermarks in the technology to be able to know what is and isn't real. And then, I think about if you build a program where we're starting to see these chatbots, so people who are interacting with a generative AI bot that is meant to resemble a human being, and does a lot of that interaction replace the human-human contact that's so important in our civilization. So I think there are a lot of really important questions to answer here, and we're going to have to get it right.
Shelley, I want to pick up on security with you. One of the in the world I've lived in, I sense a greater degree of fear that the bad guys are getting ahead of the good guys here in some ways with regard to AI. We'll call the good guys the regulators and the bad guys the bad guys. You think that's possible, that today we're at an inflection point where there's enough opportunity that malicious use of this is progressing as quickly or quicker than, say, the federal government and others can in terms of firewalls and understanding it?
Well, I think one thing that's for sure in security is every time you see a new platform, there's always new types of attacks, right? So you saw that with social media, you saw that with the cloud as we moved from on-prem data centers to the cloud. There's a whole bunch of cloud-centric attacks, right? And which sort of is good for security investments because then you need new types of security solutions to address these new types of attacks. So I think attackers will always keep evolving. And right now, I think for attacks like prompt injection that I sort of alluded to, is still early days. We haven't seen real, attacks yet in the news. It's so far it's been intellectually interesting demonstrations, right, of how you can craft a prompt to have the model be tricked or output malicious outputs. I think the PII issue or the confidential information of an enterprise that's being leaked by an employee, that's definitely happening, right? So John mentioned that, and we are seeing a number of startups. Actually, it's almost getting too noisy, right? In terms of startups trying to address that problem is just data loss prevention, confidential data from the enterprise. Yeah.
It is amazing how data has been a big thing, right, for 2 decades, but it almost goes from back of house to front of house here. Yep. In terms of the implications of data, right? It was, you think of data lakes over here and it was kind of geek stuff, and now it's hallucination. It's hallucination. And does data is data in terms of making generative AI something truly impactful? Is it all about the data? Jump ball question. Anybody wants to answer it?
I think in terms of the models, right, what we're seeing is it's still very early days. Right now, I would say majority of the usage of LLMs or Gen AI is still enterprises or employees using something like ChatGPT, right, or Bard from Google or some other existing or APIs, right? OpenAI has APIs that developers can call directly to get the tokens or the predictions. I think the next step is many enterprises are looking at their data, right? They have a ton of data and they want to be able to fine tune a model that's specific to their data, and they don't necessarily want to share or upload this data to someone like OpenAI or / Microsoft. So we are seeing also, again, a number of startups helping coming up with solutions to make it easier because I think a lot of enterprises don't have the internal data science or machine learning teams to do this themselves, right? So startups are coming up with solutions to make it easier for these enterprises to fine tune certain models, maybe open source models as they get better, right? Compared to OpenAI's model is proprietary. We are seeing like Meta released Llama, which is getting better and better. So enterprises are looking at fine tuning using their data on top of open source models and be able to address their internal applications and internal needs. But I would say data is definitely a key in this new generation of AI as well. Yeah.
John, have a view on that?
Yeah, for sure. The behavior of the systems is completely reliant on the data, and it's in combination with the statistical modeling that's going on. But it's fundamentally data-driven. And we've seen in the last few months, for instance, Twitter used to allow data access for free, doesn't do it anymore. GitHub and Stack Overflow used to allow it for free, doesn't do it anymore. Why? Reddit, same thing. Why? Because these they woke up one morning and they say, wait a minute, the company's making billions of dollars.
Right, it's better than advertising. Here we go.
What was I thinking? So that has all changed. But I also want to remind people that that's a legal Wild West out there. So, I talked about the input, the machinery, and then the output. Well, the inputs, there's lawsuits all over the place, both on the image side and the text side. You never paid for my images. And those were copyrighted and so on and so forth. So legal, cornucopia right now. And then on the other side, they're not copyrightable. So you can make that great image, but you can't copyright it because a machine made it, not a human. The copyright goes to humans. So legal, so the lawyers are having fun. Lots going on. It's the Wild West in terms of intellectual property.
So not only is this the biggest audience we've ever had, at least certainly when I've done one of these, it's the most questions we've ever had. We're not going to get to answer them all. I'm going to try to capture the themes. I'm going to lay a question off on each of you as I run through a few of these. Let's see, Brian. I think I'm going to give you the since it's a world full of financial analysts, I'm going to get you the theoretical question.
Okay.
Does AI diminish the human spirit?
Wow.
Yeah.
That requires a different kind of financial analyst.
Yeah.
I don't think so, but I want to approach everything with humility here because of how quickly the technology is changing. And the reason I say I don't think so and I don't, the answer is no, is when I look at some of the art that's been created, there are times when I look at it and think it's as impressive as, if not more impressive than some of the masterpieces that we've all known to grow and love over the years. So I don't think it diminishes the human spirit, but I think I probably need to meditate on the question a bit more to have a more precise answer. Certainly not something that's coming out of my spreadsheets, unfortunately.
No, that's a pretty heavy question, but it's an interesting one, right? It is, but it's not dissimilar from big technology changes in the past that had same implications.
Fair enough.
So let me, Shelley, you're up next. We've talked about security a little bit, but the question is, let's put your consumer hat on, not your investor hat, and how do you think about the best way to protect yourself from misinformation, from bad output, either as a producer of it or as a consumer of it? We've touched on it, but it really is it really is interesting to see John's press release about himself, right? There you go. And you got any advice for the audience on how best to screen for what's real and what's not? Maybe it's not possible.
Yeah, I have seen some early papers on building yet other models to see to kind of check on the output of these large language models to see about accuracy, bias, and a few other. So I think this is a very important issue that people are working on, and I'd imagine in the future any browser like Google Chrome that we're using may build in plugins or some sort of protection that helps monitor as we interact with these chat interfaces or other applications that incorporate AI to help us defend against potential malicious output. So yeah, I mean, I think it is a real concern, and it is it's still an area of active research and technology development.
You think about how long it took on the internet, on social media, and we're nowhere near there. John, single biggest ethical issue. I'll morph the question just a little, that you're telling researchers and students about, but it's with regard to AI. Is it the legal issues? Is it what do you see as the number one issue if somebody said you had to pick one?
Well, there's only one.
These guys are tough. They're tough questions.
You got to go meta, and the issue really is consequences. People often don't think about the consequences. I'll give you just one little example. Shelley was talking about how you can use these kind of models and make your own little version in your company so that you could get maybe answers. One of the examples I hear people say sometimes, well, our HR is so complicated, I'm going to put one of these systems on top and then it'll answer the HR question. And my response is, and then when it makes up the answer that's wrong, when it makes up the answer and tells somebody they can go on vacation when they can't, or they can take leave and they can't, and you get sued, is that what you want? These things are great for creativity. You want a poem, you want 10 ideas of what to do at Disneyland. They're wonderful where you don't have to have the exact facts, or what Bard and Bing are doing, they're connecting it with true data. And so you can do both. But there's just so many times, I mean, this is the nature of new technology. We don't think about, okay, well, what happens when the kid uses it? What happens when I use it this way? What are the cost benefits? And so people are not used to planning for working with probabilistic systems that are sometimes right and sometimes are not right. And again, if the thing you're doing doesn't require a right and a wrong, awesome, the creativity is there. It could enhance the spirit, but you just got to think about what the consequences are, and that requires thinking about lots of issues: economic issues, psychological issues, social issues, all bundled up. You need your big picture hat on.
I'm staying big picture, Brian. Implications for hardware in terms of, and Shelley, I'm going to ask you about the environment as the last question. So quick answer on how you think about it. I guess NVIDIA is one of the examples, but is this a boom for the hardware business as well as the software business?
Yeah, I think it's a continued boom for the hardware business. And what's great about being a hardware provider today is you need to put the hardware on the ground before you can even start to come up with the use cases. So, the CEO of Google, the CEO of Microsoft, the CEO of OpenAI have all said we're probably going to have a period here where AI doesn't live up to the hype over the short term, but you'll be amazed by what we're able to do over the medium and long term. Not atypical for new technologies. The hardware, on the other hand, really needs to be put in place today to be able to do the research, to build the models that the future programs are going to be built on. So NVIDIA is in an incredibly enviable position, not by mistake. Jensen had the foresight to build it, and he was also willing to take the risk. There's a great interview recently where one of the analysts who covers the space said, you can count on Jensen to be building as fast as possible and to drive us off a cliff when demand's not there, because he just always has both feet on the gas, to use an expression that I learned this week and still doesn't make sense to me. But
exactly.
They're in a very, very good position, and they're so far ahead that others are likely not in a position where they can reasonably catch up. I would just make the distinction that Google's done a very good job with they have a chip called a TensorFlow processing unit, or a TPU. And because Google invented the transformer in 2017 with the paper Shelley earlier referenced, they've started building the TPUs to be purpose-built for transformers. So they're actually uniquely well situated to perform the type of mathematical equation that's so important for this latest generation of AI programs. So as the TPU, the fifth version of it, goes live, they're going to be in a very good position as well. But others, such as AMD, Amazon with their custom chips, they're coming from pretty far behind, and it will likely take them quite some time to bring a reasonably competitive product to market. So NVIDIA is in a very enviable position, but important to remember that semiconductors are cyclical, and they've had a number of 50% drawdowns in the past, and there's nothing telling me that won't happen again at some point in the future.
Shelley, one of the things that matters a lot to our audience is the environment. It's a core Catholic principle. All that stuff has to be in machines, and it needs power, and it needs a bunch of things. And how does that play out to this good news story? I see our boss has put himself back on. So I guess this is our last question.
Sure, I'll make it quick. So I think it's actually very tied to the hardware question as well. Obviously, we are seeing startups trying to be another solution, right? Given the monopoly that NVIDIA has right now. And a lot of those startups are actually addressing or coming up with chips that are more energy efficient. I think right now, 1 to 2% of the worldwide electricity is being used by data centers, and it's projected to go up to like 13% or so by 2030, right? So it's not that far away. And a lot of that is consumed by AI-related workload. So I think we have seen both on the compute chip side in terms of new entrants, and also on the communication side, as more AI workloads come online, there actually is more increased communication between GPUs. For example, during training, it used to be you don't need that many GPUs GPUs, but to train one of these foundational models, you need thousands of GPUs, and they all need to talk to each other for each iteration of training, which means, you just see more and more, you need more and more bandwidth as well. So I think the chip companies that we've been talking to, the earlier entrants, obviously it's a daunting task to compete with NVIDIA, but one of their key value propositions is to make the chips more energy efficient. And I think another point on the hardware monopoly, it's not just a hardware, right? I think NVIDIA has such a lead because they have a lot of software support as well. So in order to make inference or prediction fast, right? NVIDIA has actually taken a lot from the open source community and built very efficient libraries that are specific to their hardware architecture, and because of that, right, people gravitate towards NVIDIA because of the software support that's there versus, AMD and Qualcomm and others also have launched chips, but there's just been, less support on the software side. I think that also needs to happen in order for us to not have a monopoly by NVIDIA. Yeah.
Fantastic. Listen, Brian, John, Shelley, thank you so much for that's a lot of wisdom imparted in this less than an hour, and really tip of the iceberg, obviously. But I hope I tell you, I learned a lot, and I hope the audience feels the same way because you hit on many scintillating topics and articulated the opportunities, challenges, realities really well. So thank you all for donating your time to help our audience be a little smarter on this very important topic. Back to you, Tom.
Thank you.
Just let me add my thanks to everyone for participating today, and especially thank our audience for joining us and so many great questions. And Jack, as you indicated, this is we're at the we're in the top of the first inning here. So
this isn't the last AI seminar we'll offer.
I think that's probably right. So we have a short audience survey that we hope you'll stick around to complete, help us do better in the future. And again, thank you all for a great program, and hope that everyone in the audience and on the panel remains healthy and safe. So that concludes our program. Thank you all very much.